Welcome back to the Natural Healers Network TV show. Up next is Magda Wroblewska. She's a marriage and family therapist in Los Gatos, and I'd like to welcome Magda.
Thank you. Nice being here.
Yes, thanks for being here, Magda. Really appreciate it.
I have to say it's a challenging thing for me because as a therapist, I'm better asking other people's questions than talking about myself.
Okay, well, I'm delighted you're here. I'm very interested to hear about you, your work, and the people you help, and so forth. So just start by telling a little bit about yourself. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe where you're from.
Yeah, I was born and I grew up in Poland, and that's where I went to school. I was 17. I remember I was 17 when I decided I'm going to be a psychologist. I don't know why. I read something about Freud, or it sounded interesting. And I did go study psychology. I graduated in the 80s, and in the meantime I traveled a little bit, and then I emigrated from Poland in the 80s. I immigrated to Canada, and I worked as a therapist in this nice government clinic dealing with people that had addiction issues. And pretty soon after I started specializing in helping women that already quit whatever they were doing, and we were looking at underlying issues of what got them in the addiction. And usually it showed up that there was some kind of trauma there. And most of the time, sexual nature of trauma, molestation, rape, domestic violence. And I somehow started specializing in that field. I worked there 6 years, and then I, just through life, how it happens, I ended up in California as my second emigration, and quite a culture shock. And I had to go back to school because my degree from Poland wasn't accepted here. So I had to go through all the process of going to graduate school, doing internship, you know, $3,000 internship. And again, I kind of always, not that I picked that, but somehow I always ended up working with women in trauma. I worked at the jail. I worked at the agency that dealt with domestic violence. So somehow that became, you know, obviously I was interested in it, but somehow it became just my area of work. And I've had my private practice in Los Gatos for 8 years now, and I love doing that. I work with all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm. What do you love about it? What is it that you know, gets you to go to work every day and you're passionate about? Tell us about that.
Well, I love when people are courageous enough to look at themselves. That's one thing. And you know, usually people are in pain when they look for therapy. There is, you know, nobody does it just for fun. But a lot of people stay in pain and not look at themselves. And I really love when people are, and when they are, I'm not sure how to say this, but they, I feel privileged when people open up to me and feel like I can actually help them, listen to them.
Yeah, I felt that way too. It's almost like an honor to be with them and to be sharing this experience with them. And one thing I've noticed that's very interesting about being a therapist is that we as therapists will sometimes have deeper and more meaningful conversations with people than they do with their own family.
That's true.
Right? Because a lot of times they're afraid to open up or afraid to share things with people in their personal lives, and we're the person that they're actually able to do that with.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty amazing thing. So then who are the people that would come see you primarily?
Well, I work with a lot of couples, and sometimes couples work end up becoming individual work because one person has some issues from the past that they need to address in order for the relationship to get better. And and of course I work with individuals. I have a narrow area of interest and expertise. I work with women that had what I refer to as reproductive crisis, which means women that lost pregnancies through miscarriage or abortion, or lost pregnancies later in term through stillbirth, or lost an infant. I find that that's a very unrecognized pain. Somehow society feels that women are equipped psychologically to deal with this kind of loss. Mm-hmm. And to some degree it's true, but I think women are never meant to be alone dealing with this. Well, there were always groups of women helping other women, and I think sometimes these women right now feel isolated because it's like, oh, you're going to get pregnant again, don't worry about it, you're young. And there is very deep pain, so I like to help women in that situation.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing I really would like to talk about is that I was trained in a technique called eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR, and that really helps recover people from trauma. So that's a technique that was developed about over 20 years ago, and it's used with people that are exposed to trauma, like first responders, even veterans of wars. But it can help with sort of this, we call it small t trauma, everyday traumatic events. And it really speeds the recovery up and makes it more effective and faster.
So when you say, what do you mean by everyday trauma or trauma? What is that?
Trauma is like, let's say, a fight with your husband, or sometimes people work on events from the childhood that doesn't have to be something major like molestation or loss of a parent. It can be just kids were picking at you at the playground, and you never really recovered from that. As you know, since childhood, you feel like, you know, there's something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And it really is worth going back to this experience from childhood and looking at it through a different lens, so it doesn't affect how you feel about yourself later. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I've found is that a lot of times those early experiences do affect us later on, but we just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people come in and they don't realize that they're still kind of holding on to things from the past, right? So how does EMDR actually help people move through that?
The technique is simple in the sense that it's based on the idea that applying a stimulus that crosses the midline of your body stimulates both hemispheres, so the brain deals with whatever material it deals with in a faster and more effective way. That's just simple explanation, but what you see when you use it with people is that it's based on a natural tendency for our psyche to heal itself. What I love about EMDR is that it's a technique that allows me to really step back, and I'm not finding a solution for my client. They actually kind of go back into the memory, and with the help of bilateral stimulation, they find their own way to healing and to resolution of these memories. And you can see it in the session. It's pretty phenomenal. I love it because it's not something that I do to the client. I just kind of facilitate their searching for their solution.
Is there anything that it might not work for? Unless, I mean, could it be any kind of traumatic experience in childhood or early on in life that I would come to see you for that? So,
well, it works the most spectacularly with one-time traumatic event. Like if you had a car accident and you really developed a trepidation about driving, that EMDR can clear that within 2-3 sessions. Where it gets more complicated, if there was a trauma that repeated itself over and over again, like childhood sexual abuse, for example, or domestic violence, when a woman was being beaten over and over again. And you can definitely recover from that, and EMDR can help, but it's not going to be one session.
Right, it's not so clear cut. It takes a little bit more, perhaps. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Now tell us a little bit about your practice here in Los Gatos.
Yes, I'm in Los Gatos. I have a nice little office off Highway 17, very easy access.
You've been
I'm
doing,
not sure what else to
well,
tell.
how long have you been doing it? Well, in this country.
Oh, in this country.
Yeah.
I have my private practice since 2005. But of course, as you know, before that I worked as an intern in many places. So I've been pretty much doing therapy for over 20 years with like little breaks when I was emigrated from one country to the next. Mm-hmm. I started way back in Poland being trained as a Gestalt therapist. But my way, my life took me a kind of roundabout way to being here and doing EMDR.
Do you use any other techniques or modalities other than EMDR? Like, do you still use Gestalt techniques or anything else?
Actually, EMDR lends itself very well to some other styles, like process therapy, Gestalt therapy, that are very close. So just attending to the client process, but kind of nudging the process along with the help of bilateral stimulation. So yeah, it's not the only thing I do. I do all kinds of other things. Some people are not open to trying it, and then I never push that. It's not the only thing I can use.
Okay. So we're almost out of time, but do you have a website that people can look you up and get a hold of you? Can you let people know what that is?
Yes, it's losgatoscounselingservices.com.
Okay, losgatoscounselingservices.com.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Magda, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And that's for our show today for the Natural Healers Network TV. We hope you'll tune in next time. Bye.